Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel Learn Code with Nav. In this session, we are going to see what is Spring Reactive programming, how we can do coding into that one as well. I am going to develop CRUD operation using Spring Reactive. Before that, I am assuming that you guys are new to reactive programming, so I will teach you, guide you what is exactly reactive programming is. At the same time, I will go through the WebFlux, Monos and Flux. Once we are done with this kind of knowledge, then we will go to the coding part and we will do the end-to-end development from very basic to the testing part for CRUD operation. I'm going to perform again CRUD operation, but this time I'm using reactive approach. I hope you will going to enjoy this video. So let's take a pause here and think about it, what is exactly reactive programming. So reactive programming is nothing but is a non-blocking application that is asynchronous, event driven, and requires a small number of threads to scale. An important point of the definition is the back pressure, which is mechanism to ensure producer don't overwhelm consumer. So why do we need asynchronous structure? So the simple answer to this question is we want to improve the user experience and make our application more responsive. Also, we want to provide a smooth experience without freezing the main thread. So when you are talking about Spring WebFlux, so basically is a new reactive web framework that comes with Spring 5. It is not a replacement for Spring MVC but a fully non-blocking reactive streams back pressure supported framework that is run on server like Netty, Jetty, Undertow, etc. The Spring WebFlux majorly use two publisher. One is Mono. Mono basically means a single or zero. Return 0 or 1 element, that is called Mono API. Allows producing only one value. So how do we create Mono object? So you can call just method and passing any type of object here. Let's say I want to create a string of Mono, then I would call mono.just and pass that string. Then it will give me the Mono of string. This is how we can create empty Mono. So this is limited to one element. So my requirement is to get list of the element. In the traditional programming, we need to write list of string, right? So instead of list, if your return 0 to an element, then the flux can be endless. It can produce multiple value. Here we have a static stream of the three elements. Let's say I do have three strings, 1, 2, and this is the 3. I want to create the object of flux, so I need to call again flux.just and it will give me the flux of string. Now this is something equivalent to the list of string. I hope you got the basic idea. Let me go to the Spring initializer website and let me create a project. So I would need Maven as a project. I am going to write the code in Java and I'm happy with any version which is greater than 3 and stable. So 3.1 is a stable version for Spring Boot. Now let me give the package name, which is group for my case, com.learncode with nav. Artifact name, basically it will be a Spring Reactive CRUD. I am going to perform CRUD operation using a Spring Reactive approach. For this we would need certain dependency. Previously we need to write, whenever we are writing any REST endpoint, we need to take Spring Web, right? This is the most important dependency we need to add in our project. Since we are writing the code into Spring Reactive approach, then we need to take Spring Reactive Web. Okay, then we need to take JPA repository, right, to communicate with our database. But in case of Spring Reactive, we would need Spring Data R2DBC. We would need DevTool again, I want to restart my server whenever I'm making any changes, so I'm not going to do it manually. And in this project I'm going to use Lombok to show you the beauty of Lombok. So Lombok is basically used to reduce boilerplate code. Let's take an example of Pojo class. We need to create same boilerplate code in every class: getter, setters, parameterized constructor, no parameterized constructor, toString method, and so on so forth. So it will reduce your boilerplate code. Okay, now I would need my application to interact with MySQL database, so I would need MySQL dependency. And now I'm good enough to go further. Let me click on generate. Now it is generated successfully. Let me go to download folder. This is the project which we just generated, right? Let me extract here. So far we have created one Spring Boot project and added certain necessary dependencies, and that is generated. Now I'm going to import that one in my Eclipse IDE. Let me go to the import statement, click on next, click on browse. Let me go to download folder, and this is the one which we are looking for. Select folder, let's say finish. Now I'm good to go. Let me go this one. So first thing first, we need to create packaging, right? We would need one package for controller, right? So my controller will be in this package. We would need service package. This will contain my services. Also we need to write one more package that will be for my repository, right? Repository, or you can say DAO. Maybe last one we would need model for our entities. Firstly, let me create one class, that is tutorial. Okay, tutorial can contain one is obviously primary key, that is my ID. Then tutorial will contain title, and description about the tutorial, right? Then we would need one more flag, that is maybe boolean of is published, whether this tutorial has been published or not. What we need to do is, in JPA we need to write @entity, right, to act your Java class as a entity. But in reactive programming we do not have something like entity, so instead of entity we need to use @table annotation, and this is table annotation is coming from relational core mapping dot table. Okay, and you need to give the name of your table. Let's say in my case it will remain tutorials. Now t should be small. In to generate your primary key in some sequence, we would have something called generated values in JPA, but we do not have this thing into Spring Reactive. Okay, now we are created our model class. Now we would need no arc constructor, we would need parameterized constructor using fields. Then we do have getters and setters, right? So this is how your class look likes. But if you still remember, I added one Maven dependency, that is Lombok. So if you look into this code, and you will see that this much, why do we need this much boilerplate code for every class, right? So initially it was containing around 58 lines of the code, but I'm going to remove that one and going to show you the beauty of Lombok. Okay, so for Nova constructor you need to use Nova constructor annotation from Lombok. For all our constructor you need to use this annotation, and for getter and setter you would need data annotation. And trust me, this much code is enough. So this code is equivalent to the line 58 code, total 58 lines of code. So is it beneficial for us? Yes, obviously yes. We are removing the boilerplate code, right? Now my model is completed. Now let me go to my DAO. Let me create here one interface. This is our tutorial repository, right? In simple Spring Boot project, we need to extend this information, this interface from JP repository. If you guys remember, if you guys gone through my video for Spring Boot programming for CRUD operation, then you will know that JPA repository we need to extend here. But JPA repository is no longer associated with us if we are doing the coding or programming into the Spring Reactive. So what we need to do, R2DBC repository we need to use, and we need to pass two parameters of it. One is which kind of a which kind of a model you are creating a repository. Entity concept is no longer associated with Spring Reactive programming. So we need to say that I am creating a repository for tutorial model, and it is asking for ID. It is kind of long. So we are done. We need to put one more annotation that is called repository. Okay, we are done with our model. We have done nothing but simple @table annotation we need to mark, and this annotation is coming from core relational core mapping table, and we are not going to use @entity, which is no longer associated with Spring Reactive programming. Okay, in Spring Reactive programming we are not going to write here generated value for primary key for auto incremented value. This is not available in Spring Reactive as well. So we are done with our entity part, we are done with repository part. Now let me go to controller and create one more class that should be tutorial controller. Okay, and we need to create to make any class REST controller, we need to write @REST controller, right? I want to give the request mapping for parent at parent level. So I'm saying this is my API. Okay, now we need to auto wire our service. Before auto wiring, we need to create tutorial service into this one, right? We need to create interface of tutorial service. This is my interface actually, so this is need to inject there. So this is my service. Okay, I need to create implementation of this class, right, in service package, which will be my service. Now we are done with the basic implementation for our Spring Reactive CRUD operation. Now we need to create controller, and to our certain thing here we need to write our service layer, and then we are good to go for testing. Okay, now we need to write post mapping. Why am I writing post mapping? Because I want to create a resource. Okay, so whenever I'm saying method post and URL is tutorial, then this method will be executed. Public mono save tutorial. For now I'm just returning, and this method will accept @request body, right? So whatever we are sending from the postman request body we will get here, right? And on this operation, on this object we need to perform operation. Now let me use service layer here and say service dot save, and let me pass this object as tutorial, right? Now we need to create this service method into tutorial service. We are done. Now this tutorial service must implement your interface, and this class will work as a service if we would mark this annotation on top of it, right? Now it is asking for overriding, right? Now I would write logic here. Just for now we need to create, let me create for method for others as well. Now this method will save my resource into the database. Now I want to get all the resources. Get is used to fetch, right? Tutorials. So it will give me, as I said in the initial part of this session, that whenever we are going to retrieve 1 or 0, then we are using mono. Whenever we are talking about the list of something, then we are talking about the flux, right? So flux, since I'm going to fetch all the tutorials into the database from the database, then I need to use flux here, right? Why? Because it's a list of tutorials. What's happening tutorial, right? Get all tutorial. It is not going to accept any parameter from here, but we need to return what we need to return. Get all. Let me rename this one and say this is fetch all tutorials, and it will give me the flux of tutorial. Okay, let me create this one more method into my service. I will give implementation here as well, don't worry for service as of now. Now let me go to the control again. This will save resource, and this method will use as fetch all resources. Now this will is used for fetch resource based on ID. Okay, how we are going to do this? So when I'm going to fetch based on the ID, so it will give me 1, right? So the return type of, and it will be taking something from here, right? It should be ID public mono of tutorial. Get tutorial by ID. This will accept at the rate path variable. So if you guys are not aware of these basic information, basic annotation at the rate request body, at the rate path variable, at the rate rest controller, then let me know in the comment section. I will create a one separate video for Spring Boot basics. Okay. Now path variable will get here, and it will be long type, right? Long of ID. Now let me call return service dot find by ID, and it will accept one ID here, right? Let me create this method, save this. They are asking for implementation. I am going to provide once I am complete the controller part. Okay, now saving, getting all, getting based on the ID. Now let me write one more REST endpoint for update. For update we need to use put mapping, right? And we are going to use same URL, but public mono of tutorial. Let me take copy paste from here. Update tutorial. So it will take ID from the path variable. Also I would need request body. So based on the ID we need to fetch the resource from the database or tutorial from the database, and from the request body we are going to update again. Okay. Now let me write return service dot update it will accept two parameter, one is ID, another one is tutorial object. Okay, update tutorials, not tutorials, actually it will be single form, right? Update tutorial, this is going to update one tutorial. So far so good. Any confusion around this? If you do have any queries, any confusion, please feel free to ping in the comment section. Okay, now I have done save, get all, get based on the ID, and update the scenario, right? Now let me delete something. At the delete mapping, and what we are going to tell, public mono delete by id. So basically delete tutorial by id, and again it will accept tutorials, then id, give me the post map delete mapping here, and from this id we are going to extract using path variable, and for this id we can manipulate and do our business logic here. Service say delete by id, and this is the id. Okay, this is going to ask a create method into your service and implementing the same method into your now. Let me add one more method here and say that this time I want to delete everything whatever we have in the database. So instead of id I want to delete everything. This is not recommended way, but I am guiding you how we can do that. So it is not going to accept any id since I'm going to delete all actually. Okay, let me create this method as well. Okay, almost we have done everything into controller part. Let me again quick review of it. We have created one simple class and marked that class as @REST controller. I am putting some mapping onto class level, okay, which is fine. I am injecting our tutorial service here, then I am creating post mapping and tutorial. Okay, then after successful we need to give some response back, right? Response status. Now we need to provide response status. So what will happen once this is executed successfully? So http status dot created. So we are creating and using this endpoint, right? So http standard says whenever you are creating any new resource, then status must be 2 not 1, which is nothing but created. And similarly we need to say once this is executed successfully, we would say response status. What will be the status for this case? Status http status dot ok. For getting we are saying ok, for deleting we will say no content. Now for deleting we are saying no content, for get we are saying okay, for update we can say okay as well. Okay, now we have done with controller part. Now let me go to same method. What we need to say here, we need to inject our repository here, and we will say repository dot save tutorial. Okay, repository dot find all. Find all is a method available inside repository, right? It will give me the flux of tutorial. Save method will accept one tutorial here and it will manipulate and save into the database. Find by id says repository dot find by id. For update, we need to call repository dot find by id. It will give you the result. Then you need to call map, and it will say optional. Optional, maybe you guys are aware, optional will reduce the possibility of null pointer exception. So in this method, if this is default if empty, then I am saying optional dot empty. Then I'm calling flat map here. Then optional tutorial I'm checking with is present. If it is available, then I would set id and save into the database again. Okay. For delete, we are using repository dot delete by id. So it is giving me something saying mismatch, convert from mono void to mono tutorial. Acha, change this one to mono void. Then if you are changing this, then obviously you need to change into the interface as well. Delete by id should be mono of void. This should be mono of void. Okay. Now you need to delete all, right? Repository dot delete all. So what we have done in service layer, let me summarize once again in a quick way, that for any Java class we need to write @ service to make that class as a service. Then we need to inject repository here. Then we are calling repository dot save method to save the information into database. For finding all, we do have ready-made method for find all, and we are calling on the repository object. Similarly for find by id, similarly for delete by id, and similarly for delete all. In update, we are calling find by id. We are getting the id from controller, and we are mapping that information and checking if this is default if empty. Then set the empty optional here. Then calling flat map of optional tutorial. Then we are checking is present. Then setting the id and returning the save object. If this is not present here, then it will be give me the mono of empty. Okay. Now let me check what is the problem in controller, why I can see red. Oh, okay, it should be mono of white, right? I don't like red colors in my IDE. Now we are done with model, we are done with repository, we are done with service with controller. Let me go to the resource folder and application.properties. Previously it was spring.datasource.url in if we are dealing with Spring Boot normal programming, right, for JP related. Now we are playing with reactive programming, then we need to use this key. And if you will look into the URL, you will see initially it can be JDBC :MySql, but in case of reactive it should be R2DBC MySql, and remaining will remain as it is. Username and password will be the username and password for your MySql locally installed. Now we do have schema. So I already told you there is no concept called @entity. So you need to create your entity or tables manually. For this we have written some SQL script here, and I'm saying create table if not exist tutorials. This is the ID, which is type of int, and it cannot be not null, and it will be auto generated. We do have another column that is title, which with varchar and description, and we do have published. So it should be is published, right? then boolean primary key is published, boolean is published. Okay, now we need to do something here. We need to mark @enable WebFlux on top of our main class in Spring Boot application. Then we need to create one bean of which will give me the connection factory initializer, which will be initialized by new operator. Then I'm setting the connection factory and set database populator here by using this schema.sql. I think we are good enough to go. Let me give a run as try. Let me try with run as Java application. Now my server is started on port 8080. Okay, go to my controller, go to my postman here, and started on 8080. Okay, and localhost 80 API tutorial, right? It should be post. Let me go to the body, go with raw, it should be JSON type. Let me go to my tutorial class and copy the title, copy the description, or is published. Title can be Spring Reactive CRUD guide, learn Spring Reactive by learn code with now is published. Should be false. Let me send this one, and if I will see, this is going to be successfully created in database. Let me switch to database and refresh this, and let me run this one. So if I will see here, ID is 1, Spring Reactive CRUD guide, learn Spring Reactive by learn code with now is published 0. This is not published yet. Now let me one more create. Let me say send again. Now you can see ID is 2, Spring Boot CRUD guide. If you will go to your database and refresh again, and you will see Spring Boot by learn code with now. Now I want to check another endpoint, which is nothing but all get mappings. Okay, instead of tutorial it should be tutorials, and method will be get type, and you can remove body as of now. And let me send the request, and you can see you are getting back, right, all the 2 records which are available into the database. Also, if you want to fetch resource based on ID, then you need to pass the ID from here. Now you are getting first record, and if you will pass 2 here, then you will get the record associated with the ID 2. We have checked for saving resource, we have checked for fetching all resources, and based on the ID. Now let me update something. Tutorial, what is the tutorials, then ID, which is fine, and it should be the method is put. Initially it was Spring Boot CRUD guide. Now I'm saying CRUD guide for beginner. Now you can get it, and you also saying it has been published. True. Let me update again. Now I want to fetch this the same. Now you can see here is published true. Learn code with Nav for beginner. If you will go to the database for checking for ID2, let me refresh this table. Now it is 1 here, right? Now last 2 REST endpoints remaining for deleting based on the ID or delete all. First let me delete with ID. I want to delete ID2 and remaining tutorials ID2. Let me click here. 204, no content is available. Let me check if ID2 is deleted from the database as well. Yes, it has been removed. Now I want to delete all actually. Now you can see I have not giving the ID here, so whatever the data will be here in table, it can be 100, it can be 10,000, any one thing, it will be got deleted. Now your all REST endpoint working as expected. Now let me go through the quick review of what we have done so far. So let me close this one and first go to the POM. Starting from the beginning, so we have added few dependencies. One is related to RDBC, second for WebFlux. RDBC will act like a JPA repository, something like JPA dependencies for Spring Reactive, and for WebFlux we are developing a reactive code. That's why we are using here dev tool. We know if we are doing any modification, we do not need to restart the server again and again. MySql connector for connecting with database, also for R2DBC MySql. Then we do have project Lambo to remove boilerplate code. Okay, then we do have some test dependency to write our unit testing. Now we have written application.properties, which is nothing but containing the information from related to database. Then I do have schema.sql, which will contain your initial creation of your table. Okay, then we do have model, which is my something entity but not exactly entity, since Spring Reactive is not supported in @entity here. Then we do have repository, which is in extending R2DBC repository interface. This is similar to the JPA repository. Then we do have controller class, which will have my all REST endpoint and which are interacting with service layer. So controller request will be accepted by the controller. Controller will communicate with a service layer and manipulate the request, and service layer will interact with database and do the processing for yourself and return back to the service, and service will give the return back to the controller. Then we are getting the response at Postman or client or web browser. For if you will look here, when we are talking about 0 or 1 for returning something, then we are using mono. When we are using the list of something, then we are talking about the flux. I hope you got the basic idea of Spring Reactive. Now you are able to perform CRUD operation using Spring Reactive approach with Spring Boot. I hope you guys like this video. If you like this one, please do subscribe and share this video with your friends. My target audience, you can help me to reach there. Thank you everyone for watching this video. Have a good day. Bye.